Hey everybody, what is going on? Hexlex here. I got another Master Duel video for you. Coming at you with some more Duelist Cup games for Fiendsmith Control, which during the latter half of the Duelist Cup, at least the first stage, I found myself really using quite a bit. We're going to start this going second game here because I think it really highlights a lot of the strengths that this deck has as far as like its ability to play a control game. And it's often through just having a sheer amount of hand traps. You're going to see just how much, I was going to say off-engine, but hand traps really feel like engine in this deck. Anyway, I'm going to start off with Ash Blossom against the Grass. I figured it was probably branded, but even still, I think using Ash against Grass with a double Fuelos in hand was still the right call, because at this point, the Grass becomes a lot more threatening than the branded fusion to me. So they have their own Ash Blossom. We're not going to get the double Fuelos off here, but we do get one of them, and they're going to go straight into Rindbrum using Albaz and Mercurio. This allows them to set up a maximum amount of interaction relative to a minimum amount of draws that they're giving me, right? Rindbrum not only has the ability to negate the effect of one of my extra deck monsters, but also bounce it, and if it's in the graveyard, it can summon either itself or Albaz, which is why during the end phase, I activated my Baldrake effect in order to banish the Albaz. End phase Baldrake will also allow me to utilize the Lubellion really well here on my turn. Retaliating Sea is a great top deck. Not only could I in theory use it against my opponent's branded fusion, but we're going to even get a proactive use out of it here. I'm going to tribute the Baldrake for the Lubellion that I just discarded to add Magnum Hut, setting up the Regained. Now I can summon Magnum Hut, banish Baldrake, Regained effect, wheel the Baldrake back into my deck, and get a draw as well as a search for it. Now, my opponent started getting past priority here. I started thinking to myself what the most threatening face-down card could be. Albaz is out of the graveyard, so, you know, if it's something like the trap card that revives, I'm not really too concerned about that. I was actually thinking Super Poly, which is why I decided to go to battle phase before going into Fiendsmith plays. Also didn't want the Rindbrum to be able to negate my effects and bounce my cards here. So main phase 2, we get to normal summon Retaliating Sea, not only enabling me to go into my Fiendsmith line, but then Retaliating Sea will simply search the Max Sea. It really is an excellent card for this deck in particular in this meta. Of course, we have it here against Dracotail, but we have a lot more utility for it outside of just that matchup. Alright, going into my Fiendsmith line here, we got the Lacrima, we've got the Engraver. And sure enough, my opponent will flip up Super Polymerization, discarding another branded fusion from hand in order to summon the Garura. Which is perfectly fine with me, because I can simply go Regained effect, summon back the Magnum Hut, already use the effect this turn so I don't get another search, but I can add a Baldrake, which will not only let me draw a card off Regained on my next turn, as well as banish one of their cards from the graveyard, but I could also use Baldrake's on-field effect, even if they have more plays. So that's a pretty good example of a going second, very control-y game where we're not even using like anything super out of the ordinary. We're just using a lot of hand traps to control the opponent down. But let's go ahead and show off a more proactive going first game. Okay, so this duel is going to be a going first game, like mentioned, and this will actually be against Dracotail, if I remember right. Of course, the whole reason I wanted to test Retaliating Sea was the Dracotail matchup, so here we're going to open the Retaliating Sea plus a couple of Lubellions. The really nice thing about this deck is that even if you just open Lubellion plus a normal summonable hand trap, then you could go into Fiendsmith plays, right? Like I could summon my Bestial Monster, normal summon Fuelos, and go into Moon. Obviously, I'm not going to do that since my opponent immediately fired off the Fuelos and the Max Sea, but it kind of did it, in my opinion, at inoptimal timing. If you're going to shotgun it, you should definitely do it during the draw phase to avoid triple attack, but also because they didn't do it in response to an effect that actually special summons, now I'm going to give them 0 draws. They're going to be on a 3-card hand, and in this matchup in particular, that's really bad for them if you consider what all is left in my hand here. Alright, they're going to go activate the Phimena. We're going to chain Fuelos. And that does end up resolving here. So now they're going to fuse Maxi plus Orgola in hand and summon the Arthelion. Maybe, because I noticed they had a second Maxi, maybe they top-decked Phimena and were trying to find plays, which is why they were a little bit desperate to get the draws out there. But we're going to Imperm the Arthelion here to stop them from adding back the Phimena. At least that easily. Orgola's going to set Ketu, and they could still use the Orgola effect in order to add back 5 mana, but that's kind of my goal, right? I want them to use as many of their effects early as possible while using a minimal amount of negates. Now they're going to flip up Ketu, and we can throw down the Retaliating Sea, the card that's obviously going to be very, very good against them. So not only will this cause them to banish all their stuff, but now I actually have a body to defend myself, and it's going to make it that much more difficult for them to actually be able to OTK me here. Golemel gets summoned. They're going to activate Branded Fusion. Retaliating Sea is still on the field, so those cards are still going to get banished. And they go for the Lubellion here. Now, Lubellion would have allowed them to recycle their banished stuff in order to get another fusion summon, but they would have needed to have discarded a card in order to be able to do that. They didn't have anything left in hand. So, battle phase, Retaliating Sea is going to get to activate once it's destroyed and go for Max Sea. And I get to block even more damage here by summoning the Magnum Hut in defense mode, while also getting a search out of it. Decided not to block the Arthelian attack because I would rather have the Baldrake in my hand, and also I don't need to, I can take 3k, that doesn't matter when I'm at full. Now I'm going to end phase summon the Druiswarm that I searched, because now I'll get to be able to summon another Druiswarm here on my turn. So I can go Lubellion search for that other Druiswarm, sack the Druiswarm on my field to summon the Lubellion. Now Druiswarm effect will send away their Arthelian. Lubellion effect's going to activate, placing the Regained. Druiswarm summon, Regained effect activate to cycle to draw. Hoping to top deck a Fiendsmith card here, but that's fine. I can just normal summon this Droll and Mockbird, and then use that to go into the Moon of Closed Heaven. Like I said, the Fiendsmith engine is never far away. This does trigger their Arthelian effect, but I had the call by, so I really wasn't concerned about it. Plus, I did want to call by Arthelian in particular, because now, even if somehow I don't, OTK them this turn, and, they are able to have a follow-up turn, now they can't summon Arthelian to use its effect on that turn. But they've already procced my triple attack, so here we can just go for the Lacrima, send Engraver, summon back Engraver, and then we'll go Engraver, equip with the Requiem, send away their last monster, or send away one of their monsters and triple attack the other, and that's going to be lethal on board. Yep, we'll steal the Golemel here, and swing in for lethal. So yeah, I mean, just another example of how we are using nothing but the raw power of hand traps to just completely shut our opponents down. And it definitely helps that we had Retaliating Sea in particular against Dracotail. However, I think with this hand, we didn't even need the Retaliating Sea to be able to beat them. It just made it like super easy mode for us. But I did want to demonstrate at least one duel where we are resolving Retaliating Sea against Dracotail, considering that's the whole reason I'm playing the card in this deck in the first place. But I have a couple more games for you. Let's check out the next one. Okay, this game is going to be against Kashtira, if I remember correctly. I should have played this duel like an hour ago, but let's see here. We are going to be taking the first move, and we open Lubellion plus something we can normal summon, so that sounds pretty good to me. I'm looking at this hand, and yeah, I think this was the duel against Kashtira. Gonna go Lubellion for Magnum Hut. We can throw down the Regained we opened, which is actually really nice. You might think, oh, it's not that good that we open Regained because it's searchable anyway, but if you open Lubellion without another Light or Dark monster, you end up having to banish it anyway, so I'm actually fine opening the Regained here. They're going to imperm the Magnum Hut. It's a little annoying, but fine, especially because we top deck a Druiswarm anyway, so I have another Bestial monster. Gonna go normal summon Thualos and then link the two into Moon of the Closed Heaven. I did think about normal summoning Retaliating Sea and linking that instead, just to be able to have Max Sea. Like, it was debatable, and I think it is still debatable which is actually the better play. Like, Max Sea is so powerful, going out of your way to get to it is not a bad idea. But at the end of the day, I was like, if I'm up against Dracotail, which is the most likely deck I'm going to be playing against, I would much rather have Retaliating Sea in hand, believe it or not, than Max Sea plus a dead Thualos. Plus, I also figured that normal summoning Thualos to link it into my Fiendsmith engine here was the most use I was going to get out of Thualos, because I was going first and activating Branded Regained. And Branded Regained is going to be on the game or on the duel for the rest of on the board for the rest of the duel / game is what I was trying to say. So that being the case, I'm never going to get to resolve Thualos. So I don't know. It's kind of like I gave up the anticipated value of Max C search in order to get any amount of value off of Fuelos, if that makes sense. Alright, so here they're going to throw out Extrav, and I'm going to Ash Blossom it just in case they're on stun. I was also thinking it could be Voiceless, in which case Retaliating Sea would be really good, but it ends up being Kashtira. So they're going to go Ogre Summon. I'll still revive Magnum Hut and activate here because I've already summoned my Desiree. I've cycled through my Fiendsmith engine. There's really not much they could banish off Ogre that would have me sweating. You know, the funny thing is here, they did actually reveal an Engraver, which I was a little bit concerned about, but they just banished a Ghost Spell anyway, so I was like, okay, that's fine. They're going to set Kashtira Prep. Now here I was debating if I wanted to negate the Rise Heart, but then I kind of figured I could just negate whatever they summon off of it. And if they had Theosis in hand, then I would have really regretted negating the Rise Heart there. They're going to go Dark Armed Dragon of Annihilation, trying to destroy my Branded Regained, which I have to negate here, but I did realize, like, oh, at this point they can actually attack and go into Zeus, which would be really bad for me. But thankfully here, they didn't realize that Desiree isn't just like a negate that effect, it negates the card, period. Not even just for the turn, it just negates it, period, while it's a face-up on the field. So now they can battle, and they could go into a Zeus, but now they won't have 2 materials. Which is pretty good for me. Was able to control their board down with Desiree there. Got one last duel. Let's go ahead and take a look at that one before I show you the list. And our last game here is going to be a going first duel against Odion. Now, there is going to be a pretty crucial misplay made here that I'm going to make sure to point out. And I can explain the reasoning behind it too. Spoiler alert, it's my misplay. Going first, we opened the Fabled Lurie, so glad to see any amount of the Fiendsmith engine going first. It's really rough winning the coin flip, choosing to go first, and then having nothing but hand traps in your hand. It does happen sometimes, but I still think that... Ooh, voice crack there. I still think that in this kind of a build, it's right to go first, because we're playing 3 Fiendsmith tracked, and we want to be opening our Fiendsmith card to be ending on some amount of a board state, even if it's only like a Desiree or a Caesar or something. Typically, if I'm not interrupted, I'll go into Desiree with Ognum Day, just to basically set up a giant sort of towers. I mean, it can be destroyed, it just can't be targeted. That can also negate. Although you could make an argument for Caesar having 2 negates against like Dracotail. But, okay, so here, the reason I didn't set Imperm is because my opponent was getting past priority a little bit during the end of my turn, so I thought it might be a Nibiru. So my thought process was, okay, if they Nibiru, then I can activate Desiree, send my own token, and then Fuelos and Imperm will be live. So that's why I chose not to set Imperm there. They end up setting 4 and then passing, so I'm like, okay, it's some kind of back row deck. Maybe Lab, maybe Odion, maybe even like Sky Striker or Dinomorphia. Here's Apophis the Serpent. I'm going to negate that with Desiree, and thankfully they didn't really have anything else to activate here. So we can swing in for 5,800, looking pretty good. Gonna set Imperm, then activate Regained. They're gonna flip up Verdict of Anubis. But I'm actually fine with that, I think. I'll set up Fuelos as a follow-up for any future plays. Alright, now here comes the misplay. They're gonna activate Temple of the Kings, that's fine. Then they're gonna activate the Treasures of the Kings. I was thinking about them being able to set an Apophis trap card. And I thought to myself, you know, I think it's fine if they have Apophis, a Swamp Deity, like that doesn't really do anything because that targets cards up to the number of cards I have and negates them, right? Well, that was where I was mistaken and that was my misplay. Because Apophis, a Swamp Deity, actually does not target cards up to the number of continuous trap cards. It doesn't target. So, yeah, I thought my Desiree was going to be safe from being able to be negated. But then when I realized it wasn't, I realized how badly I screwed up. I think the right play was to activate Desiree in response to the activation of Treasures of the Kings. I could have negated both it and Temple of the Kings, and then I would have been safe. Although maybe not actually, because they had an Apophis the Serpent. They could have set another Swamp Deity, and they would have been able to activate it this turn, but they wouldn't have had Man with the Mark to follow up, or the other set card. So yeah, that was a pretty big misplay on my part. Again, I thought Swamp Deity targeted, so I thought sequence protecting Desiree would be enough to save it here, but no, they've got multiple swamp deities. Given that they already had a swamp deity face down they could activate, I might have been screwed either way. Because they would have been able to activate it in response to me activating against the field spell, right? Like, because this card they had already set and it was swamp deity. So if they had activated this and I had chained Desiree, they still would have flipped up swamp deity and negated my Desiree and gone full combo. Okay, so I did misplay, but they would have won anyway. But that doesn't mean it was okay that I misplayed because they would have won anyway. It's still important to look back and reflect and see where you could have done better, even in a situation where, you know, your defeat was inevitable. It's still important to learn from your losses. And that's also why I think it's really important to look at games not being like... I just think one of the worst attitudes you could have going into a duel, like a replay like this, as you're watching it, being like, well, they had combo no matter what, so it didn't matter that I screwed up, I would have just lost. They just had everything, and be frustrated about it, right? Because if you pick out where you misplayed, even in the face of inevitable defeat, you're still going to be able to look at that in the future, right? Like in the future, now when I face against Odion, I'm definitely going to remember Swamp Deity does not target. Like that's going to be locked into my brain because of this, going back and looking at this replay. That's why I think it's really important, the attitude that you have going into your games and just trying to hold yourself accountable while not blaming yourself, you know, and beating yourself up too badly for it. It's a balance, as is with, you know, most things. Anyway, let me show you the deck list here now that I've shown you the replays. Okay, so here is my deck list for Bestial Fiendsmith Control. It's still the same list from that last video where I had live gameplay. But again, I wanted to show some amount of games where I actually played against Dracotail and other situations where the Retaliating Sea did come up. And I'm actually pretty decently impressed with this card in this deck. Now, I don't know how many decks you can make, you know, enough room for to play this, like 3 of this, but I don't know. It's still, for me, Retaliating Sea versus Ghost Spell is like, this card is so much stronger against Dracotail, but this card is still so much better in so many more, like, general matchups. So I don't know, it's a bit of a, you know, pros and cons there, but I do definitely respect the strength of Retaliating Sea, even in scenarios where you're not playing against Dracotail. It's just that a deck like this has so much room for off-engine that we can very easily make room for tech that is specific against the meta. So for this build, I'm on 3 copies of Fiendsmith's Tract. It's not necessary, however, if you're going to be going first with this deck, I think you do need to be on at the very least 3 Tract. I do find myself thinking that if I owned more than 1 copy of Lacrima the Crimson Tears, I would definitely be playing those as well. You want to be seeing as many Fiendsmith starters as possible, I think, in this deck, to be able to take the first turn. If you only own 1 Fiendsmith's Tract, again, you can still play this deck and that's fine. I think then, if I were you, I would play, like, maybe a couple more hand traps or even board breakers, like more copies of Triple Tactics talent. And then if you win the coin flip at that point, I would honestly just pick going second. Because at that point, you don't really have enough going first starters to justify going first, right? And then you become more of a going second deck, which is totally fine for a control deck like this. It's really weird to look at a list like this and think going second, like choosing to go second with it. But there are a lot of hands where that is actually correct. So, yeah, I think whether you go first or second in this deck totally depends on the number of starters you have. You know, we have the Fiendsmith engine, which is Lurie, Lacrima, the 2 Engravers, plus 3 Tract, which is actually not that many. That's only 7. But the Lubellians I also count as starters because, again, Lubellian plus any hand trap you can normal summon will allow you to pivot into the Fiendsmith engine. So we kind of have 10 in that regard, and I think that's like the bare minimum for what you would want to go first with. Again, if I had 3 copies of Lacrima the Crimson Tears, I'd honestly probably try throwing more of them in, because I do want to be going first with the build that I'm playing. If I had 3 copies, I'd probably cut like a triple tack, and then I just one of the hand traps, maybe one of the Seas or Ghost Spells, and throw those in, and be a lot more comfortable going first. Extra deck here, I really like all the options. A Baoku has really still not come up for me. Although, to be fair, in this kind of a engine, like, it's still nice to have the option to go into her, but there's not really anything super strong for us to revive here. except for maybe some bestial monsters in certain situations, or maybe some of our extra deck monsters, again, in certain situations, like, I don't know, Chaos Angel or something. But what I do think is important is to have at least 2 Fiendsmith's Requiem in your extra deck. This is definitely our most important monster to be able to go into our proactive plays, and this is a control deck. You are going to have grind games, and there are going to be a lot of game states where your Requiem might be stuck in the graveyard, or your opponent banished it or something. So having that extra copy in the extra deck, I think, is pretty crucial. I've even had at least one game where I went through my second one and kind of needed a third one. I think 3 is overkill for the most part, but you could make room for it if you didn't own like Ptolemy M7. You know, this card never really came up for me. Another rank 6 option that I've been considering putting back in is Lars. I have summoned this a couple of times, but yeah, if you want like a budget option, don't want to craft something like Ptolemy M7 or like Necroquit Princess, then you could just throw in a third copy of Fiendsmith's Requiem, and again, that would be, I think, fine, if not, I don't think it would be optimal, but I don't think it would be bad either. So yeah, that's pretty much my thoughts on the list and on the deck right now. So that's going to be it. Thank you so very much for watching, especially all the way to the end as always. Super appreciate it. Let's go ahead and move now to our outro. Hey everybody, Hexlex here. Thank you so very much for watching all the way to the very end of the video, which by the way is one of the best ways to support the channel. Speaking of supporting the channel, take a look at the names on screen. These are folks who have been so generous as to either join as a YouTube member or subscribe over on patreon.com/Hexlex to support. There's also perks for doing so. If you would like to see YouTube videos early, as well as some exclusive videos that get uploaded to YouTube, but for one reason or another I decide not to publish, definitely go ahead and hit that join button to see content early, as well as some exclusive content. If you're looking for more exclusive content, over on patreon.com, I upload exclusive videos that are not posted on YouTube just about every single day. Whether you choose to subscribe over on Patreon, join as a YouTube member, or simply continue to watch, your support is greatly appreciated. Thank you so very much. But for now, this is Hexlex. I am signing out, and I hope that you have a fantastic day.